John, there are actually presence principles we learned on what are the dials that you can turn and the levers that you can pull in a relationship to increase the connection or decrease it if they're not being paid attention to.
The spouse of an entrepreneur can make the difference between making it or breaking it. And today with Kelly, she has her business Entreprenewer, where she renews the spirit between an entrepreneur and their spouse with these principles that you discussed. There's 6 principles we go through in detail with some actual examples that you and I execute and maybe also need to improve upon.
Yes, and there were a number of kind of quotable quotes that were memorable in this that I immediately intend to bring back to Shelby, my wife, and have conversation around some of the things that came out of this very podcast. Here's Kelly Clements.
This episode is being brought to you by IOI Ventures. We all know that digital marketing is vital to our company's growth. Unfortunately, many of us entrepreneurs don't know where to start. We simply feel overwhelmed by acronyms like CTA, CRM, and GA. It's time for all of us to stop feeling stuck because our partners at IOI Ventures have the experience and track record to get us moving in the right direction. Want to learn more? Go to ioiventures.com/EU and sign up for your free 30-minute consultation. All right, Kelly, welcome to the Entrepreneurs United podcast.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. We'd love to hear a lot more about you and what you're doing, but more specifically, we're going to dive into this conversation about how you're helping entrepreneurs, not only in their business, but in their lives. So before we get into the meat of that, can you give us your root story as to exactly how you came to do what you're doing today for entrepreneurs?
Sure. In a nutshell, I was 25 years old thinking that I was going to have a fun career as a wedding planner or some kind of other live event, high energy career. And I went to a company called Strategic Coach for what I would refer to at the time as a practice interview. And if you're not familiar with Strategic Coach, that is a company founded by Dan Sullivan that is committed to helping entrepreneurs. And as soon as I walked into the office at Strategic Coach, it felt like I had found my mothership. And long story longer, I got hired, I found my purpose, and my life just basically skyrocketed. I got really into personal development. I got bit by the entrepreneurial bug. And so every day after work, I would come home and tell my brand new husband that we should start a business together. Basically, I spent all day, every day in workshop rooms with successful entrepreneurs, listening to them talk about their business and their lives. And most importantly, how important their relationship with their spouse was. And so I learned way back then that the spouse of an entrepreneur could make or break that entrepreneurial journey. And I thought we would be bulletproof and we could do it together. And one day why can't this just be enough for you? Why do you always need more? And that would put us into what I call the ambition gap. And slowly but surely, our lives started to take very different directions and our marriage would ultimately end up in divorce. And at the time, my young boys were 2 and 4. They're now 14 and 16. So this was quite a long time ago. But in my next relationship, I chose somebody directly opposite from my ex-husband, more closer to me on the ambition scale. And so now we had 2 alphas. And about 4 or 5 years into that relationship, he looked at me one day and he said, "Where's Kelly? What happened to that woman I fell in love with, the one that could light up any room?" And it was then that I realized that I lost myself. I had shifted from high energy alpha to lonely, removed from self beta. And so I know distinctly what it's like to be on both ends of the entrepreneurial spectrum. So I can relate very closely to both people in a typical entrepreneurial relationship where one might be an entrepreneur and the other isn't. And so my message is from my mess. My test is my testimony. So I've created a business on what not to do.
So you went from high energy alpha to, you describe it as lonely, removed beta, and you were removed from yourself. Tell us more about that.
So what had happened is that I found that I had lost myself in the gravitational pull of him and his business in the name of being a supportive spouse. And I will tell you, it's the first time that I really felt like I got to quote unquote be the woman in the relationship. It was the first time where I felt like I had a partner where I could really lean into him and his leadership. And I think I got so comfortable and relieved in that space that I stopped guarding my own preferences, my own needs, my own desires, and just handed everything over to him. And it was a very slow fade. until that one day when he called me on it. And I realized, like, I don't even know who I am anymore. Like, it's been one decision after another where I've been prioritizing him and what he needed or wanted and lost myself. And I've ended up feeling very lonely, very low energy, very confused. I felt more needy from him than had ever been needy in a relationship before. And it was because I was looking to him for my own validation. And so that's the work when I work with spouses, is to help them reclaim their own personal identity, their own fulfillment, so they're not so dependent on their spouse. And in that space, that's when the entrepreneur is more comfortable gravitating back towards home and his romantic partnership, because his spouse is confident he's lit up, they're on equal playing field.
What did you do to go from this kind of feeling lonely and removed from yourself to feeling more connected or prioritizing yourself? What does that process look like?
That actually, there was, I heard a quote and it became really clear to me. So that relationship ended. And I was like, I obviously need a break, like one extreme to the other. Like, I need to get really clear on what's good for me. And I heard a definition that one of the definitions of holy is to set apart. And I was like, God just needs to set me apart and do whatever he needs to do in me, for me, through me, without the imprint of a partner right now. And so I just got really good at enjoying time with myself. I wasn't constantly looking to other people to fill the voices in my head. Like, I just got really good at listening. And when I wasn't trying to run away from whatever was happening in my head, it became less scary. I became more fulfilled. I became more clear on what my next moves were. So it was just about getting really still, enjoying time with myself, and treating myself the way that I wanted any of my partners to have treated me before that.
Makes sense. And what do you do for entrepreneurs today? How do you use the story that you just shared and replicate that over and over with the entrepreneurs who you work with?
Yeah. So I find that the benefit of working with a coach, and that's what I do as a coach, is I work with entrepreneurs and their spouses. The benefit of having a coach is now you have an objective third party that often says the same thing that a partner or a spouse has been saying all along. But when I can put it in a different context, it's easier for the entrepreneur to digest what we're talking about. And so one of the biggest challenges for an entrepreneur is I work so hard. I'm like working nonstop to provide this amazing life for my family. I'm doing this so that we have freedom and that we have options, and nobody seems to appreciate it. And I don't know what else to do. And quite frankly, sometimes I just don't think that they're capable of being happy, because I've done everything I can think of and they're still not happy. And when I can say, yes, you have created an amazing life, but they're not asking for more options, they're asking for more of you. And so when they watch you put all of this effort and all of this intention into the business time after time, it makes them feel like they're at the bottom of the totem pole, because they're seeing this Herculean effort go into the business. But when it comes to things in the home front, it's, we can outsource that. You got that handled. I'm not good at that. I don't want to do it. And so they're using the same overlay of what works in business in the home, and it's causing marital friction. And so it's not just giving the entrepreneur that perspective, it's also giving the spouse the same perspective shift of, look, this is actually a gift. Because if they're not good in it and they don't want to engage, they're not trying to be lazy or like pawn you off. They're trying to preserve their energy so that you guys can spend high quality time doing activities together. And so it's a perspective shift on both people's sides so that they have a better understanding of what the other person might be going through.
So, Kelly, the name of your book is Growing Your Business Without Growing Apart.
Yep.
And that, to me, that just says it all right then and there. And I think about my own personal situation. And my wife and I have been married for almost 20 years now. Love her to death. But anytime we have to work together in a particular business or project, it's okay. This is why we don't actually work together. We're a really good couple over here, excellent couple, extraordinary couple. It's fantastic. But every time we work together, it's okay. That reminds us that we should probably have our own separate things from work, because we connect on a personal level. We don't connect over here. So that's one particular example I just wanted to throw out. Do the entrepreneurs that you work with mostly work together in a business or separate?
Mostly separate.
Okay.
There's a really nice blend. Some are in business together. Some have they each have their own separate businesses. one might be an entrepreneur, one might be traditionally employed, or one might be an entrepreneur and one doesn't work outside the home. So there's a nice blend of all different demographics or variables.
Okay. Because I've ingrained in me from a very young age, I believe, I have this notion in my head that you should never work with your spouse, but it goes beyond that. You should never work with family members or
Mhm.
really get in business with really close friends, even sometimes, because it can be the root of leading to a different path. For example, you mentioned about the different types and ambition gaps. So that can happen with partners that
Mhm.
aren't necessarily in a relationship, but you partner up with somebody and realize, oh yeah, we have different goals and ambitions, and it's like oil and water. How comparable is the intimacy of a relationship in what you coach versus just a relationship?
Sure. It really depends on the couple's personal preferences, capacity, and tolerance. And so every combination comes with its own set of advantages and challenges. Couples who work together tend to have higher levels of interdependence because they're working so much together. They know every facet of one another's lives. So there's a little bit of a perceived notion of having higher intensity because they're really intertwined in so many areas of life. However, without a lot of discipline, what that couple lacks is some variety.
Mm.
It's if they go home and on date nights they're talking about business and their couple friends are people who are clients or team members. And so it becomes very homogenous if the couple doesn't have extreme discipline of being really intentional about bringing their own world of variety into the relationship. Couples who where one might be a business owner and one doesn't work outside the house, there is that ambition gap and maybe they can feel like they're not quite meshing in terms of what their dreams are, what their goals are. They might have a shared vision, but their contributions might feel different. Overall, the healthiest pattern that I find is one entrepreneur and one person that's traditionally employed because both have their own worlds, both have their own goals and ambitions. But what that couple lacks is they don't always have the same freedom because maybe the entrepreneur has can take relatively quote unquote any time off, but a person who has more traditional employment might be working with vacation time or PTO, so there might be some blocks there. So
Yeah.
really there isn't a better than or worse than. It really depends on the couple and their individual capacity for interdependence on one another.
Okay, got it. So let me just challenge Rich and myself. I'm going to challenge Rich because I know what I'm going to say already, and he doesn't. But what are some tips and tricks? I'm listening to this as an entrepreneur. I'm like, okay, what are things I can do to be more thoughtful about my spouse and us spending time together outside of this thing called work? Whether we're
Mhm.
working together or not, it doesn't make a difference. It could still consume you, right? An entrepreneur stress brings it home or whatever it may be. There's some certain things and strategies that I've used that I'd love to hear, Rich, what potentially strategies you've seen. And I'd love Kelly to maybe provide our listeners with some other examples of things that people can do to work on the relationship outside of the business, because I think that's really important. So I'll start. But if I was to write a book on relationships and how entrepreneurs can grow their business without growing apart, the title of the book would be Saturday Night Date Night. It's something my wife and I have been doing for over 20 years because we've done it before we were married, but we still every Saturday night have our date night from the time the kids were newly born to now today where they can watch themselves. We have our night. And quite honestly, most of the time, the subject of business never comes up. Because if it does, then we realize that's not our zone where we could do that during the day if we want to have a conversation about that. But Saturday night, that doesn't come up. So that's one trick that I've used that's worked for me. Rich, I'd love to hear an example from you, and Kelly, I'd love to hear some many more examples that maybe I can execute or others can execute.
Sure.
So if chapter one is Saturday night date night from
Yep.
you,
Hmm.
chapter two would be stolen moments.
Tell me more.
That's what Shelby and I call them and use are what we call our stolen moments. We have is four kids, all daughters. And when all four of them were in the house, there wasn't a lot of time for just us. So we would find what we would call stolen moments where it would just be the two of us that we would take the time to connect and go drink our coffee out on the front deck for 5 minutes together. Or if we dropped one kid off at soccer and another kid off at dance and we are both available, we'd go out and go grab an appetizer and a drink. and take the half hour before we had to go back and pick up kid number one. So we very purposefully, consciously looked for these kind of stolen moments out of the day, out of the week where we could connect.
That's great. Kelly,
You
fill
guys,
us in. We got a few more chapters to go.
you're both model students. What I would add first on date night, that's the number one. And I always start there because we need date nights to loosen up the soil. We need to keep things fresh. And if there's burden or challenges, like it helps keep thaw people out when we have that adult time away. But when it comes to date night, what I would really suggest is playtime. Often when we talk about date night, it's an automatic dinner. And that's great. But a lot of times what happens is we end up talking about work, kids, house, to do schedule, and it's good to sync up. And so those that might not be a bad meeting to have a marriage meeting to sync up on those things. But when you can get into play with your partner, it releases that oxytocin. So you have that, you reactivate the love hormone. It keeps things fresh. When you look at your dating relationship, the entire thing was based on play. And that's where people fall in love. So date nights should be active. They should be engaging. They should be in outdoor novel environments. Something that you guys can create or do together is one upgrade that you might find on your date nights. And on stolen moments, that comes to what I think is the most important that women are really looking for, because that's where we experience pursuit. I have a whole diagram of what the presence principles are, and generally what men are looking for in their relationship with their partner is a sense of play, high degrees of praise, and shared sense of purpose. So play, praise, and purpose, and that's what men generally appreciate in their partnerships. Women, on the other hand, what they generally appreciate in their partnerships is provision, protection, pursuit. So it's not just financial provision, it's social provisions, it's emotional provision, it's co-parenting provision, it's bringing your full self to the relationship or the life that you're building together. And so when I going back to stolen moments, that's where I hear opportunities for pursuit. And pursuit in a long-term relationship are not the big trips. It's not the big anniversary diamonds or these big gestures that we often hear about. It's what I call the one percenters. It's every morning bringing her coffee. It's every day after work, like phone is away. Tell me, like, what was the best part of your day? Left eye to left eye, intense eye contact, curiosity, openness, not trying to solve everything, physical contact that is doesn't have the innuendo that this is trying to lead to sex, like just really present, engaging pursuit. It's your well-being is the most important to me, and I'm here to learn about that right now. And that's how we keep that sense of flirtation alive in long-term marriages. And I think that
Wow.
happens in stolen moments.
Yeah. And Rich, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm guessing that you still have the chivalry of opening Shelby's door.
Yeah, I actually, early on in our relationship, what, 12 years ago now, I talked to her about, I would like to do that for you. And is that something that you would like? And she said, yes. And I said, then I would like, if you happen to go in first, just stand on the side of the door and let me open it for you. You don't ever need to open it for me. I want to open it for you. So to this day, you could watch us go into any restaurant or anywhere. If she happens to be in front of me, just how we're walking, she'll stand on the side of the door. Not so I pull the door into her. She'll stand
Mm.
on the other side of the door and I will open it because that's what I want to do to serve her. And that's what she accepts.
Yeah.
Mm.
Even the strongest, most independent women I know love those simple, basic gestures. And it's even my personal trainer, who's a bodybuilder, like fierce, wild woman, when she talks about she's gone on a date, she's like, he opened the door for me, or he asked if he could do this. And it's, oh, finally, like there's a tremendous relief when a woman can trust her partner to do that and to just like in those basic moments of chivalry, because it helps us lean into our feminine, which is our pleasure center. And that's where we're lit up and electric and keeps you guys coming back and like gravitating towards us instead of always the business, which is where you're generally more confident.
Another one of those I was taught by my grandfather was that the man walks on the outside of the road
Hmm.
and the woman walks on the inside. And apparently, the story is that came from when there were wagon wheels and horses, that the wagon wheel would pop into a rut and splash up a little bit of water from time to time. And it was the man was accepting that splash up if that were to happen and not the woman. So again, to this day, John, I will walk on the outside. And sometimes if we get started walking, I will just move over to the outside. And it's not as much of because we're worried a car is going to splash water on her. It is a sign to her that I'm thinking of you and caring of you in this way, that she receives it that way. So it may sound like a little thing, but in that little moment, she receives love and caring that I have thought of her. And I'm doing that very intentionally to care for her. So that would be another example of, with the opening of the door, like we do. And you know this, that's why you said that, John, that we do a number of little things like that. And we do the touching on the arm that's non-sexual but physical touch. And there's one woman in this world that I feel like in our marriage, and it works for us, that I can look up and down and undress with my eyes, and that's my wife. And I do that very purposefully, at least weekly, on purpose to get caught, that she
Mm.
knows that I'm looking at her and I'm appreciating that I believe she's beautiful and I find her attractive.
Mm.
So that would be another little thing that we do. I'd say, John, I'm going to go with chapter 3. Chapter 3 would be vacations, would be my chapter 3. Shelby and I, we are so blessed. We've got both of our parents live in the same town. Both of our parents really enjoy time with the grandchildren. We are able to have the grandchildren be our children, be with our parents over a weekend. And Shelby and I can go escape for 2 nights or sometimes 3 nights. And we say, we just want to go out and just be adults who really enjoy each other's time. We don't want to be mom, dad, provider, who does the laundry, who takes care of that. We don't want to wear roles. We just want to be adults who can have fun together. And we're really fortunate with the setup that we have, that we don't have to pay anything. It's not even
Yeah.
to a babysitter, right? It's
Yep.
grandparents who we highly trust. And so that'd be another thing. I'd say vacations would be my chapter 3, John. Do you have a chapter 4?
I want to defer to Kelly because I feel like when you're meeting with these entrepreneurs, you must be looking at these 3 P's or 6 P's maybe to try and find those opportunities, right? For them to mix. So when I hear Saturday night date night, stolen moments, vacations, they all sound like pursuit to me. Maybe vacations play, but I'd
There's
love to hear
different.
how do you cover those bases and how should we look at those intentionally?
It's pursuit if he is planning them. It's pursuit if he's planning and initiating them. If she's always the one planning and she's always the one initiating, there is no pursuit. And that's exactly where you put all of this into, you can plan your next business conference and do that. Like, why can't you plan our family vacation? Or why can't you plan a family vacation that isn't attached to this business conference? And so you're right, it is pursuit as long as he's planning and initiating.
Yeah, touche. So
When
I
it's always on
listened.
her, she's feeling like, why am I dragging you in?
Yeah, I listened. The first time I heard you was on Kira's podcast, and I literally came home to my wife and said, "All right, touche, you got me." Because every time we do go on Saturday night date night, we live in a pretty small town. It usually takes us the quarter mile to get out of our neighborhood before we decide where we're going to go, and it becomes a frustrating moment because she's trying to figure out where she wants to go, and I'm like, "You decide. I decided last time." And I came back and I was like, "Okay, you're right. You're right." Kelly's telling me that I should just take the initiative and make the decision and or provide a couple of options and take that out of the hands, because to your point, it just going on vacation with your spouse but having them do all the planning because you're too busy with
Yeah.
your business is not intentionality of pursuit to the woman's side. So I'd love to hear it,
John, before you move on,
yeah.
I got to share with you another quirky little thing maybe you'll do on that quarter mile now.
Okay.
When we have a date night or when we go on vacation, this is so quirky, and you'll probably just make fun of me for it. We will literally turn to each other and shake hands and use our first names. And it alternates on whoever does it first. I'll literally turn over and say, Rich, and she will shake my hand and say, Shelby. And that is us checking in as just two adults. This isn't mom and dad. This isn't, and that is us like leaving all of our roles behind. And here we are just together as Rich and Shelby. Those are the only
Yeah.
roles we have, is just to be
Mm.
us with each other and fully enjoy our relationship. Quirky, but on that quarter mile, when you said, we have the quarter mile, and it immediately occurred to me on that quarter mile that we have too, we're driving and we will exchange the check in as just being ourselves.
I
I
may
like
not do
that.
that exactly, but I will be thinking, "Oh my gosh, Kelly's telling me I need to plan where we're gonna go, where we're gonna go, where we're gonna go." In my head, I need to plan where we go. But Kelly, give us some more tips. What else should we be doing to provide? I loved what you call presence principles,
Mhm.
which I guess the way I read that is, how can we be more present in what our partner needs? Is that
Absolutely. And that's always the number one request when I'm working with spouses. Like, I just need him to be present. And he's, I don't understand. Like, I'm home. Like, I come home from work early, and it's, yeah, but you're not present when you're still on the phone. Or most entrepreneurs can't turn off their brains. It's like they get home and they're still thinking
sure?
about the new project, the unsent email, the team members. It's hard to shut it off. And we know that whether you're actively on your phone or not, we know you're checked out. And so these presence principles offer entrepreneurs a dashboard. And I think that's why it's so easy for entrepreneurs to gravitate back towards business because, as I said before, they're confident there. They know which levers to pull. There's two levers to pull in business: make more money, save more money. Are we adding team members? Are we adding revenue? And so they know because they have KPIs there. They know what to do to build their business. I don't know what to do with this. I'm terrified of her anger. I'm just going to go here because I can fix it here. I can control it here. I'm confident here. The presence principles give entrepreneurs a place to check in, like which dials do I need to turn right now? Do we need time to play? Do I need to pursue her? Is she feeling neglected? Is she feeling my only provision here is financial and that I'm just like the money guy? And so that's why the presence principles were developed, was to give entrepreneurs a dashboard so they knew which lever to pull. And I think to that extent, I call it interruptive priority. And that's where, when we're at home, whether it's nights or weekends and something happens with the business, we're quick to pick up the phone. But during the day, if family calls or family needs something, it's like, I don't want to leave to help pick up the kids from car school, or the family doesn't get the same interruptive priority. And the fact is that we're in a complete, like, the 9 to 5 was built on the industrial age, and we are so far past that. The smartphone changed that for everyone, and we have the ability now to take time out to have a lunch with our partner. Like, we can go into work late because we went to yoga with them in the morning, or there's other options where we can dice up our day where our partner gets the same interruptive priority as the business does.
Hmm.
Are the
So
presence principles the 6 P's, by the way? Is that different?
Yes.
Okay.
Nope. The presence principles are the 6 P's, which again are play, praise, purpose, provision, protection, pursuit.
Thank you.
So, Kelly, we talked a lot about a couple of our chapters, what we are doing as males for our significant others, and shared with us your story of having two different husbands and didn't necessarily work out. And I think I understand on the men's side, I guess on the women's side, provision, protection, pursuit. I think I got it. I think I understand, at least conceptually. I could go a lot deeper. And on the men's side, really, it's play, praise, and purpose. And I think I understand play. But
Mhm.
how can females in a relationship, whether they're the entrepreneur or their spouse is the entrepreneur, execute praise and purpose?
So praise is really about understanding the compliment to criticism ratio. And then what
Mm.
that means is the traits that we initially love about our partner in the beginning that initially attract us to them are generally the things that are a little bit opposite to us. And so, I love this about him or her. I love this about them. I love this about them. And over time, it's those exact same traits that turn into like our biggest annoyances, our frustrations. And so naturally, our relationship over time can shift from really adoring and loving phrases to highly critical. And sometimes it's because we take each other for granted, or we just take the fact that they know what their strengths are for granted, and we don't have to tell them all the time. And so, what ends up happening is now the feedback that we're getting from our partner is more about what we're doing wrong than what they appreciate about us.
Mm.
And so, the praise piece is really paying attention to, look, there's plenty of opportunities for criticism. Set your boundaries, hold your boundaries, call your partner out when there's bad behavior, and make sure you're speaking life into them, especially as women, because we're life givers. And I don't think this is what I didn't understand in my first marriage. I didn't understand how powerful my words were. And
Mm.
that every time I offered a suggestion in the absence of praise, it came across as criticism. And comparisons were criticism. And every time I launched those comment by comment, I was constantly pushing him down, and he believed me. And so I think that if women understood that every single thing that they said to their partner actually informed their identity and created the partner that they had, I think they would be a lot more intentional with really speaking life into what they appreciate, what they respect, because what we appreciate appreciates. And so if we're really focused on speaking about what's working about our partnership, what's working, what we love about our partner, we're going to get more of those qualities.
That is so easy to remember, just that praise is this compliment to criticism ratio. I've never heard it so simply described. And I have seen in couples exactly what you described, that it goes from this courting of how great the person is to all of a sudden we'll hear couples sniping each other in these passive aggressive comments that we know has some background steeped in their home. Glad it looks like the Joneses cut the grass. And it's, hey, there's something like behind that that it just doesn't feel great for us to be in the presence of. And we hear that a lot with other couples, is that ratio of criticism to compliments. Do you have such a do you have a memorable kind of nuance like that for each of the six presence principles? Like when we talk about purpose, what would be the bullet point that we should remember about purpose? Is there something quite so anchored as that?
Yeah, when we talk about purpose, it's two happy, healthy people create one happy, healthy relationship. And so both people understanding what their own personal purpose is, what their own personal role is as individuals helps create a stronger, more unified couple. And I want to be really clear here. Purpose does not always equal profession. And so it doesn't mean that both people have to have some high powered, high impact job. It means that both people have to be intentional with how they're using their talents and spending their time and energy. And I see that's where the ambition gap comes in, is if one person doesn't have the same intentionality on how he or she is spending his or her time, it does create the ambition gap, because our partner's looking at us like, "Well, you could do anything. If being the best mom or dad in the world lights you up, do that, but do it well and be excited about it, not in deficit and defeat that like you don't feel like you're doing enough." So one of the most extraordinary couples I've ever met is an entrepreneur, and his wife is like very clear, like, my purpose is my family and I am lit up. Like, I find so much joy in it. And I had to stop judging myself that I wasn't doing more. And the second she stopped judging herself that she wasn't doing more in the world like her husband was, like, all of it went away because her self-judgment went away. And so that's what the purpose comes down to.
Thank you. And the last one that doesn't seem as obvious to me is on the provision side. What's the memorable piece of that on how I can wrestle with what that is or how to provide that?
Most entrepreneurs feel like because they're able to provide most often a great financial life that if you believe that provision starts and stops with finance, you're dead in the water. Like, that's the tool that provides these options. You building the life and providing your insight into parenting ideas or collaboration or how to care for aging parents, providing spiritual leadership, providing social opportunities, providing intellectual expansion, but just bringing more of yourself than just the paycheck. And there's actually a lot of relief in that. She's not asking for more money. She's not asking you to go work harder. She's asking for you. She's asking for your heart. She's asking for your ideas. She's asking for your engagement. She's asking for your presence. That's the provision piece.
So it's almost like provisions is, in your words, it's really about providing and then parentheses more than financial.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, got it. What is it that you hope if you could give a gift to every entrepreneur as it relates to their relationship. And you can only give one. And you can't give one that is 6 presence principles. That's 6 things. You can only give one, and it doesn't need to be a presence principle. It could be something else. What would be one thing that you would love to gift the world of entrepreneurs that they would never have to work on again? It would just come automatically to them.
That's a great question. I would give them the peace of mind that comes after they realize that they can put the axe down. They can put the shield and the armor down because most entrepreneurs build up a big business out of, I'll say, a provingness. They're looking to prove something or overcome something, and it's a really healthy and productive way to channel whatever insecurity or trauma or upset that they have come from. Most entrepreneurs have a story, an overcoming this story, and it works really well with them to a certain point until they realize that they're a slave to it. And it's that facade or that armor of success that they've put up that keeps their spouse out. And the spouse knows it, and the spouse can see it, and the spouse wants in and to love them. And the entrepreneur is, I cannot put this down. I cannot put this wall down. I cannot put this axe that I'm grinding down, because if I do, I won't be successful. Because this axe that I'm grinding is the thing that has driven my success. And if I lose this, if I round out this edge, I will lose it all. So my gift to them would be the knowingness of the peace of mind that what happens when they put that axe down is they are creating from an entirely new playing field. They have transcended out of creating out of defense, and now they're creating out of creation. And the abundance and peace of mind and connection that exists for them on the other side of that is exactly what I would gift them, because that tips all the other dominoes.
Kelly, the name of your company is Entrepreneur, spelt at the end Newer, newer. Can you explain the significance of that to us?
Sure. The emphasis is actually on renew, the entrepreneur. So with the word
Renewer.
renew at the end, and
Okay.
that's for entrepreneurs who are burnt out. They don't want it. They don't know how to fix any more problems. They don't want to go back to marriage counseling. What they're doing isn't working. And my background is in entrepreneurial coaching. As I said, I started with strategic coach, Colby certified. So I have a foundation in business coaching. And what I know for sure is that when you get your love relationship, it creates 1 + 1 = 3 synergy in the business. Even if the spouse never works in the business together, but a renewed love relationship automatically revitalizes the business as well. And so that's what that word renew at the end stands for.
I love that. And that's one last thing I think you should leave us with as well. You gave a really good example in one of the conversations I heard you about how much one Clydesdale can pull versus two. Can you tell our audience about that? I thought that was fascinating because it speaks
Sure.
to that 1 + 1.
Sure. So one Clydesdale, which is a draft horse, working alone can pull 8,000 pounds. So it stands to reason that if you had another Clydesdale, you could pull 16,000 pounds. When in fact, two Clydesdale working together can pull 24,000 pounds. They don't double their capacity, they triple it just by working together. And that same thing happens in not only in business, in life, because now you have two sets of eyes, two hands, two brains, like a total view, two new perspectives to help expand the world, your worldview. And so that's why I use that example, because it is 1 + 1 = 3 synergy. Everything gets easier.
Thank you for that. If people want to get more of you, how would they go about doing that?
You can go to my website, kellyclements.com, or I'm on all the socials, either as Kelly Clements or The Entrepreneur, spelled with the word renew at the end.
Great. Thanks for being on today.
Thank you for having me.
Please stick around for a few more minutes while Rich and I break down this episode.
John, let's look at these presence principles. I want to recite them to you one more time. Play,
Okay.
and let me ask you the question and I'll recite them. I'll give you time to think of the answer. Which one do you think is strongest in your personal relationship with your wife, and which one do you feel like you could work on? Play, praise, purpose, provision, protection, or pursuit? Which one would be strongest, and which one do you go, you got some work to do?
I'd say with Amy and I, play is the strongest and also the opportunity to do more.
Tell me more.
So may not be what you expected. You may expect me to pick
No.
one versus the other. I feel very comfortable with the other ones that we're doing a lot in terms of our relationship and the ratio of criticism versus compliments and the purpose of being two happy, healthy people. I feel like we're doing a lot in all those areas. And I do feel like compared to couples that we know, we do play a good amount. We do vacation a good amount. We do go out every Saturday night date night. But I also feel now that our kids are getting to the point where in a few years they're going to be moving on to their lives, whether it be collegiate life or post collegiate life, that is going to be the glue that will continue to ignite the fire of us wanting to do more things together when you get to that empty nest kind of stage. So I feel like it's carried us to this point in such a way has been very beneficial, but it also needs to continue with that spark and that fire, finding passions of things we can do together in a play type environment. That may be doing service, that may be going to different destinations and doing different things. But that play factor to me in the next chapter of our lives upcoming is going to be the biggest opportunity for us to continue to improve, work on, and really enjoy spending time together.
Mm.
How about you?
I could see how like it's more important, yeah, as a empty nester, and you're closer to that than I am.
Mm.
I would say praise might be our strongest. We don't do a lot of sniping. We don't have a ton of criticism that isn't boy, anybody that criticizes would feel it's warranted, but there's not criticism. There are areas where we will talk about where we're disconnected, but where we do it is in a positioning of it's a two of us on the same team against the problem.
Yeah.
It's criticism of the circumstance or how things worked out, that we talk about how things could have worked out in a particular scenario better. So anyway, now I'm talking about criticism when I'm really talking about compliments, that
Yeah.
the praise we do really well with.
Hmm.
And when there is criticism, it's on the right thing. It's on a circumstance or an issue. It's not on the person.
Yeah.
So I'd say that's what we do. I think the provision one is something that I could think more about. Providing. Uh, I often don't ask myself, how am I providing more than just financially? I know I am when I reflect on it, but I've never challenged myself to say, what are some other ways I could provide? Or I've never even asked Shelby, hey, what are your needs you would like me to provide for outside of just financially? We've
Yeah.
never had a conversation about it. I've never put purposeful thought to it. That leads me to it. It must be something where maybe I have some opportunity.
Yeah, that's great. And I think there's two things that come to mind as well in this conversation that could have been discussed with Kelly. And I'm just thinking about it now after the fact. But your whole example of looking over at Shelby as you're driving outside the neighborhood and say, "Hey, I'm Rich and I'm Shelby," and like reconnecting. That is the 25 years ago talking about scratching the record. When you and I were learning the paradigm shift and how to scratch the record. And we actually
And
had
that
an
was a Tony
example.
Robbins thing, by the way.
Yeah, Tony Robbins thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely, you're right. You just reminded me of that, of how you need when things aren't going exactly as planned and you're getting snipey. Do you have a code to be like, hey, let's scratch the record here and be, oh yeah, we're acting like idiots. Let's stop this nonsense and let's reconnect. But what you're doing is a form of scratching the record. You're leaving the house as mom and dad and thinking about the lunches you guys did today for the kids or whatever's going on. And that moment of reconnection is okay, done. We're now showing up to be together. It's a scratch the record type of
Yeah.
opportunity. I think that's one of the tricks I learned not only from Tony Robbins, but from you specifically. We had some examples at one point that if ever we were to get in an argument, I don't know if you remember this, or we were getting in an argument, one person was to stand on the chair and act like a monkey.
Yes.
And it would remind us that we should just laugh this thing off and move on. And we didn't do it that often, but it was an
Yeah.
example of what we could do if ever things weren't working. And I think the other part too that is really important in relationships that maybe came up in this in a roundabout way, but maybe not, was the ability to let go. I find that when I get snipey or aggravated or whatever, I'm holding on to something. I'm holding on to something that she might have said yesterday or earlier today, and now I'm going to be snipey back, and then she's snipey back the other way. The ability to let go, The ability to have a conflict, and that's something I think we got a lot of training on too, right? How to effectively address conflict when there's something wrong, to be able to talk through it and move on. Way too many couples, in my experience, business partners, colleagues, I can go down that hole, hold on to conflict that they do not address when it needs to be addressed and move on.
Mm,
And I think part of one of the things that Amy and I have tried to do is never go to bed without the conflict being addressed and handled. We may not have loved the way it handled, but we're still at the end of the night, hey, I love you. Let's move on. The next morning, we move on. And that's certainly something that I think is really important in a relationship, is the ability to address in an effective and healthy way conflict, because there will be conflict.
agreed. It makes me think of when you bring up conflict that Shelby and I have discussed, but not in writing, kind of some guidelines of how we engage in conflict. Included in that are raising our voices at each other is an indicator that somebody might need to take a break
Yep.
and come back and be able to have a conversation, de escalate emotion. We do not name call or make global assessments. You always, you never.
Yep.
We don't do that. We have the conversation before we go to bed, very similar to you. We want to talk about how do we not be here again before that conversation is over.
Mhm.
We don't just talk about resolving what happened. We talk about how do we make sure we're not here again on this topic. So there's some things like that. I don't know if the average couple does that. I guess I'm assuming no, but I don't know. Do you and Amy have unwritten rules, but discussed rules on, hey, when we have conflict, here's what we need to do to make sure they're productive?
Not as structured as that. I think they evolve over time. I know what would trigger her if I said something. I think she knows what would trigger me.
Over experience.
Yeah, and sometimes we do it because we want to trigger the other person, but we know what it is. We know what those. When you have that relationship, and by the way, again, I'll go back to colleagues or partners in business. You build this relationship where you know when you say something, you're triggering them,
Right.
and that can be very unhealthy because you're doing it to poke the bear for some other conflict you haven't properly addressed. And to me, that's one of the dangers in a relationship is when you are, to your comment, wasn't it great that the Joneses do their weeding? And you're trying to send a comment, but you're doing it in a roundabout way because you don't know how to properly address the conflict, or there isn't that air of trust to be able to sit down and have that conversation. And there's ways to do that that I think we're still learning. I'm sure you guys are still learning, but you evolve and you learn how to do that in an effective and healthy manner. And I go, the biggest thing I love about this whole conversation is, and I changed it in my own head. She said, two happy and healthy people equals a happy relationship.
Yeah.
And when she gave that example of pulling 8,000 pounds versus 24,000 pounds, I think about it, two happy and healthy people equals an amplified healthy relationship, right? It's really not two powered people now. You almost got the power of three or four people within the two in that relationship. So I think that's a really important thing because entrepreneurs that are missing their other half, it's not just missing the other half, it's the other half may be bringing them down or holding them back in
What do
some
you mean by
ways. Or
missing the other half?
Amy's been instrumental in my entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah.
Instrumental from the get-go. Instrumental in backing me and supporting me and being there for me when things go tough, whatever it may be. That helped amplify me and push me forward to achieve a level of success that I wanted to achieve. If I didn't have that, it'd be a missing foot of the stool almost. It'd almost be
Got
like it would be like I'd be missing that. Why don't you go get a real job and make some money? I'm tired of
it.
supporting you, or whatever she would say. So if you're missing that element of support, or worse, that element of support that you're counting on is actually giving you the complete opposite and derailing your ambitions or constantly criticizing you instead of complimenting you or whatever it may be, and it's draining you. There's a lot of entrepreneurs who quite honestly fail or give up because they don't have that support factor. And that's why I think when she said a spousal relationship is so critical to entrepreneurial success, that's I think what she meant.
Yeah. Yeah. And one more touch on conflict. I just think you'd be tickled by this, that the conflict resolution model that we both got taught 25 years ago has when you, I feel.
Yeah.
So when you do such and such, I feel this emotion. And then it's just, let's have a conversation, or here's what I need and why. I had a incredibly proud moment just last night that Katie, our 16-year-old, had her friend Reagan over. Reagan ate dinner with us. Reagan was talking about a friend who was me, where it's a friend but an
Yep.
enemy, and she went to a concert with her, and but this friend is really not acting constructively in their friendship with Reagan. And here's Shelby at the dinner table, and Shelby says, Reagan, could you just have a conversation with this other person and just say, when you, I feel? And it was such a proud moment because that's the model we use
Yep.
professionally that, I've brought into personal relationships.
Hmm.
And here's Shelby actually teaching that to someone who's a teenager. And Shelby knows it well enough, and she was able to just access it that way because she gets the language on how to have successful conflict. And she's teaching it to a teenage friend of one of our kids on how to have successful conflict. I just thought you'd enjoy hearing that, and you could relate with the proud moment of here Shelby teaching our professional conflict resolution model to a teenager.
Yeah, no doubt. And that if when you, I feel, it's certainly one of those I've continued to teach. And it's a good reminder of when you do have something wrong in your relationship, whatever kind of relationship it may be, that addressing it in a delicate manner of, hey, when you do this is how I feel, as opposed to attacking them, name calling, whatever it may be, because no one can really challenge how you feel. It's a really safe space to start the conversation. So I love that. And I think entrepreneurs that want to grow their business without growing apart should get a handle of this book and really read it. And what Kelly loves to do is she loves for both the entrepreneur and the spouse to read the book together. And I think that's one thing you've done with Shelby that is role model. I don't think Amy and I have gone to that extreme where we openly talk about the methods to which we're going to handle conflicts or the structure of it. And by reading the book together, Kelly's book, you form the same kind of language that can assist you through this process.